I am joined by Brendon Prince. Hello, Brendon.
Hey, how we doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. Now I'm looking behind you. It's quite an exciting background. I get to see lots of backs, well, behind people's stuff, and it fascinates me. Is this somewhere in your home? Can we work out things about you from what's behind you?
Yeah, I suppose you could. Not positioned on purpose. It's just a case of this. I live in an old Victorian villa, and we've got an old Victorian. I suppose it's an orangery type room that used to be an artist room. I can look at the sea. And when we moved in, I thought, do you know what? I'm going to get rid of these 1970s tiles and clad it and turn it into, because we had young kids then, turn it into a kind of a club theme that the kids can just go wild in. So they clad it with, I mean, these are old surfboards that have either defunct or broken, or I've broken them. Lots of cool stuff, darts, big TV. So the kids could just enjoy the room, and just be a blessed time, because I'm a big believer in, a lot of the kids' parties, things, have them here. So I know, where they're all up to. They know how to behave. And it's just cool. Anyway, kids are a lot older now. So, as in either left or too old for such things. And this is my office. So there's lots of memorabilia and just stuff to kind of take my headspace away. It's a blessed space.
It looks it. I'm looking over your left shoulder, and there's a little tiny guitar. Is the guitar irrelevant?
And that is a little ukulele.
Yes.
I was given for my 40th birthday to learn how to play the ukulele. Don't ask me to do it, but I can do it. Can do it on the odd little bit in here and there.
Hey, look, I can make a noise with a guitar. It's just not in any way musical. I tried to learn the guitar one time, and it just hurts my fingers. And I just think, why? Why would I
It's
want to hurt
hard.
myself?
Yeah, it's hard. That's it. That finger movement. That's where practice. 10,000 hours of practice.
Yeah, I can never. I played the keyboard, and it's like it doesn't hurt to play the keyboard. So why would I want to learn something when I'm going to have grooves in my fingers that hurt all the time until they get so hard I can't feel them? How does that sound like something that I want to do for pleasure?
And the dexterity of moving those fingers. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have that. Keyboard, yes. Guitar, no. Right, let's get into this then. So, what is it you do? I mean, you've got surfboards and you've got the sea. So, there's suggestion of some sea interest. How far does the interest into the sea go for you?
So crikey. I became a kayak instructor when I was 16. Lived, brought up in South Wales. Those that know South Wales, not particularly water orientated, i.e., back in the 70s and 80s, the water was just brown. So I used to go into the valleys to do whitewater stuff, and then further along the coast to do surf stuff. So I always had a passion and a love for the water. Um, God guided me in some mysterious ways to come to Devon as a young teacher. So I got my first job as an outdoor education teacher and PE teacher at the boys' grammar school in Torquay. And that just, exploded the amount of water stuff, because Torbay is an amazing water environment, especially for taking kids. Did that for 23 years at the school. Loved it. Within that, I was the chairman of the Surf Lifesaving Club and did surf lifesaving. And because of my volume and the amount of time in the water, you just get to the point where you see accidents happen on the water. And being a lifeguard as well, threw myself into the position where you see more of that. And there's only so many times you can hand a child's body back to a parent or a loved one, a father, back to their family, before you think, do you know what? I got to do something about this. So I set up a charity called Above Water, which is the water safety and education charity. It goes into schools teaching water safety. Because for me, being an educationist, that's what it was all about. The only problem is with that sort of thing is we live in a coastal uh, a coastal island that is completely reactionary. So it's really hard to get stuff done unless something's gone wrong. So what I mean by that is the charity, if I look at the charity accounts on a Monday morning, I'll know if somebody's drowned on the weekend because we get a spike in donations. And I just find that tragic. But if I go and say, we need some money for this because we want to do this education project, we might struggle to get the money for it. So we're really reactionary. So I thought, what can I do to really change things? Get my name out there a little bit more, have more podcasts, more interviews, national, international. So I was a stand-up paddleboarder, a waterman. So it made perfect sense to attempt to stand-up paddleboard around the UK. So I set the world record for that, set 9 world records since on the water. And that has opened the door to just really promoting the water, because, as I say, we're an island. We should be promoting the use of it. We're just starting to get it with wild swimming and paddleboarding being so much more prolific than it ever was 20 years ago. Just simple ways of getting on the water, but also then mindful towards this water safety and actually making, if we can stop the 700 odd drownings, tens of thousands of accidents, implications from near drowning, just put an end to that, because it's not rocket science. So here I am with a charity that does exactly that. And for my own personal, I now do adventures and explore and get out on the water in a way to promote safe use of our coastal waters, inland waterways, but also hopefully inspire and show that the world that I live in is blessed by the Lord, and that's the path He's sent me on a boat with.
We're going to have to go back to the 700 deaths. You talk about bringing the bodies back. The obvious question is the one I don't want to ask, but I have to ask: how do you possibly process having to bring a body back to shore? Because that, whoever you are, is going to start to mess with your head.
Yeah, without doubt. So it's funny because you can deal with the body because when you're holding a body, the life has gone from that body. The soul is gone, and what you've got in front of you is not the human that was once there. You can deal with that. It's the reaction of the families that's the real difficult bit. And I had real issues with seeing those families visiting me through the night. And that's why I had to do what I needed to do, because I have to justify every day that I've done something to make that not happen for somebody else. And I really struggled with that for a good few years. But now what I do, and the help and guidance of the Lord has changed the ability to be able to really put it out there and talk about it, because it's an important element to talk about. That is my why. That is what I do. That is why, in some people's views, what I'm doing is putting myself at risk. But I think it's more dangerous walking down the high street and crossing the road than it is being 50 miles off the coast on a stand-up paddleboard, because everything's relative, isn't it? And for me, that's my natural habitat. Whereas I'm more likely to get mowed over on a push bike than I am out there with a boat.
No, that's fair enough. I can understand some of that. And I guess as people of faith, then you've got the added dimension of this person in front of you. Did they know Jesus? Did they not? That would be my brain. And trying to process that, and did I do enough? But clearly you're trying to do enough. You're trying to make a difference, which a lot of people wouldn't. They would just walk away. No, can't go with it. I'm done, and they'd be gone. But what's interesting is not that you are, but that you are despite what you went through, because so many people would think, no, can't cope with this. I'm done. But you've said, well, we shouldn't have to cope with this. What can I do about it?
Yeah, I think you only need, when something goes wrong in water, more often or not, it's one of the happiest things that is happening that suddenly turns south in a second. And that's where the reality for those family and friends that are watching the scene, that processing of trying to understand, all that child has done, all that adult has done is gone left when they should have gone right. And that's what's led to drowning, because it can happen within a heartbeat. And it's getting that across and helping people to understand that, when we see it in the movies and someone's in trouble and they're shouting for help, that's not how it is, So helping them to make the right decision, to know to go left and not right, to stay safe when there could be dangers, is part of the process and is part of my continual kind of grieving process for those families. You never forget in any way those families, the bodies, the people that are involved. And as I say, they wake you up in the middle of the night and ask for justification of what you're doing as a fit and healthy human, or given these skills on planet Earth to make a difference, because it shouldn't happen to any family.
I want to come back to the work you do in the education, I guess, that you're doing. Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? If you're going to the seaside, it's to have a good day. You're not going because you want to have a miserable day. You want to have some fun. It's like you say, you're going from such a high point to such a crash to that low point. So I want to come back to that in a while. But you've talked about faith in your life. You're talking about being a teacher and how God sort of steered you. Because I'm thinking South Wales surfing is not the first. That's not a link I would necessarily naturally make. But how did God steer you into having a faith in the first place?
So I was brought up in a Methodist stroke Baptist environment. South Wales being very Baptist, very traditional in it. So that was just half a course. Sunday school every Sunday, service every Sunday. You were part of the church kind of activity, youth club, all that sort of thing. And I was just brought up with it. Now, sport has played a massive part in my life, and sport being team orientated sport and water sports just meant that I was always kind of doing stuff. And it just was very easy with a Christian family to be able to do that. So it's never judged, never any issues with that. So then going on from there to some traveling to do with water sports, and I've paddled in some amazing places around the world, because whitewater paddling was my kind of thing for a while, until I kind of got to the point where I thought, do you know what, am I taking God's blessing too far with this? Because I've lost all my 9 lives. They're all gone. So how many more can I have? So I actually, when I went to university, curtailed that and thought, do you know what, I'm gonna start climbing. So I did mountaineering, with all the water sports in the background as well. But again, it's only a matter of time, when you're pushing the boundaries, that you just got to wheel it a bit. And was having a family obviously does that to you. And I spent a lot of time, as I say, nurturing others' ability to get on the water and to surf, to stand up paddle, to open water swim. I mean, I was running an open water swim club 25 years ago, at the point when people used to point and stare. Now everybody wants to get in the water and benefit of cold and all that sort of plunge effect. So that was just my world, and the Lord has always been there within that. And I've never stepped back from it. And I think I've never met anyone who truly is a water person, whether they do it for a career, whether they do it recreationally, but they've pushed the boundaries a little bit, who does not have a faith. Because when you are, a man out at sea is the most alone you can ever be. And the things you see, what you can encounter, the definition of life, the stuff you can properly taste and feel, is a wonder. It's an absolute wonder. So that's where you just rejoice in that. And you can't think of anything else, because it doesn't happen by chance when you see those wonders. It's been blessed.
I understand the pursuit of stuff. I'm not a sporty person. However, I can understand the passion and the drive for it. I also can understand why you think, well, let's go and do a world record, because then people will know who I am and I can do something good. I can do something with a name. But why did you think that stand-up paddleboarding around the UK was a good idea? Where did that particular little thought come from?
Well, a good friend that I now know, who wasn't a friend at the time, was actually an adventurer called Jordan Wiley, was actually attempting it. And I was a stand-up surfer, and I did some stand-up paddleboarding. And I got into stand-up paddleboarding, and I loved the adventure of it, going exploring the wilderness of just being out there. And this guy was doing it, and I relish that understanding, the first kilometer of the water. So from where the waves are breaking to a kilometer out, that's such an interesting space. It's where so much wildlife happens. It's where all the fun stuff but all the dangerous stuff can really kick off. Love understanding all that. And paddling different waters around the world, you understand that different water is different. So the water on the south coast of Devon here is completely different to the water only 100 kilometers down the road in Cornwall. It's just the texture, the way it feels, the way it moves is all completely different. So I love all that aspect of it. And it's really a case of just bringing that into your life in what I was doing. And you set a world record and people pay attention to you. And, you know, I've done thousands of interviews and podcasts and books and so many elements that otherwise, why would anyone invite you to do that unless they know you've got these world records? So you've obviously pushed the boundaries in some way. And I love stand-up paddleboarding. So kind of putting that all together, why not attempt? And as I was planning, Jordan had to stop what he was doing. So it was kind of open for me to give it a go. So it took me 141 days to paddle. Let's face it, paddleboarding it's like throwing a cork into the sea. It's knocked and moved around by every other force, wind, tide. You've got to fight everything. So that was the challenge. There are much, much easier ways of getting around the UK. So that was the challenge of doing it on a stand-up paddleboard.
You see, me personally, powerboat around the UK, I could do that happily. I wouldn't go the route that you went. I mean, I put a hat on in the boat, you know, I'd do something, but we each have our limits and our strength.
Absolutely.
But I love how God called you into that because of what you could do as a result of it. But what's the mentality of that? Because for me, you were talking about like going from where the sea's breaking. We can understand that it's the seaside, it's the beach. Okay, from there, you know, kilometer out. You're talking about being dangerous. I have no idea why. I just thought water was water. I know salt water, fresh water, fine. But why is that first kilometer so dangerous?
So that's where the action happens. In that our tides, which is a flow of water that goes around the UK, is often at its strongest at those points because it pinches between island and mainland or just headlands. So that pinch creates greater flow and waves. But also what happens with conditions on a day, you might have the wind in your face that day, which creates little waves. You might have the tide with you, and wind against tide creates a chop. But you might have had a storm in the Atlantic a week earlier that's still got residual waves coming in. And they pass you and sort of hit you on one side, but then they bounce off the cliffs and then hit you on the other side. So you said you're putting all this together that's the feeding ground for so much, whether it be bird life, whether it be the big mammals in the sea through to all the different fishes. That's where it all happens. So you go around a corner and you never know what you're going to see going around that next corner. And that is a magical thing. You know, and the sights that I've seen, you know, the wilderness, the wildlife that you think is only on documentaries in other countries. We've got it all here in the UK. And you kind of put all that together and a stubborn determination, blessed by God, that every day you're doing this for a great purpose, you know, get out there and do your thing. It's 141 days later.
There you go. Problem solved. End of. I imagine stuff like sunburn and the waves, the salt. I mean, I can understand that you're going to get salt water in your mouth. That's going to be hard to deal with. When you talk about these amazing things you see, what is it you're seeing? That because I don't even know what you're talking about. What are these amazing things that you're seeing?
So you've got all the wonders, but the stuff that really kind of makes you, you know, the eyes wide open stuff. Puffins. Let's talk about puffins. Puffins are beautiful little birds. We've got gazillions of them. They're about as useless as me throwing a tennis ball at flying. So you might be paddling and 1,000 of them might leap off the cliff. And 500 of them will actually make that big dive, and they'll clear the water and actually start flying. The other 500 won't, and they'll just kind of hit the water. And, you know, they're perfectly safe until they hit the water, because then everything that is either on top of the water or in the water comes and gets them. And you're paddling, and all of a sudden there's carnage. mouths coming up from the water, mouths coming, other birds, and within 10, 15 seconds, those 500 beautiful birds are literally a mess of feathers. That's it. Seeing that type of thing is mind blowing when you paddle around a corner. But then so is seeing an orca, seeing a basking shark, seeing a humpback whale, listening to humpback whales talking to each other as you're paddling in the fog. And the majestic nature of their singing, but it's incredibly eerie and goes straight through your soul as you hear it. And then obviously the spine tingling, am I going to get eaten moments where you do see, orcas the size of transporter vehicles plowing through the water towards you just to come and say kind of hi. No one's ever been eaten by an orca, but I think that's because potentially they're so big that one gulp and you're gone anyway. So, but that's all the wonders of our coastline. But also then you don't expect 20,000 seals on a beach in Norfolk, or all these different things that just are a massive assault on your senses, because you'll smell those 20,000 seals on the beach 10 kilometers before you get to see them. And that's just all a wonder to me.
I had no clue. This is like a great awakening. I know there's little fishes in the sea. I get that. I know there's some whales, but like you said, I did not know until right now that you've got all that in front of you. I knew we had puffins. I didn't know they were quite so stupid. But I didn't know. This is like a whole awakening of life to me.
Yeah, and everywhere. It's not just in parts of Scotland. You can see amazing bird life around the whole of our UK. The seals. I mean, we have at least one or two seals on every headland around the whole of the UK now because of cleaner waters, and fish for them to be able to hunt. And if there's seals, then there's the other stuff that feed on the seals, and that chain goes upwards and down. And we've got such amazing things. I mean, I've seen paddled into basking sharks that I thought were massive logs were actually huge fish. Porth beetle sharks, which look like kind of 7-foot great whites, all make you paddle that little bit better and make you stand up straight as you're paddling.
Yeah, if I saw that, I would see. That's why I'd want the boat, a very big boat. But that's me. And the thing is, God's made you to want to explore that. And it is exploration at the end of the day. Like you said, when you don't know what's around that next corner, or that log is not a log, it's actually a basking shark, that's exploration. I can definitely understand the excitement of what I might meet, but you've also got to deal with the fear of what you might meet. And you're holding these things like a juxtaposition of fear versus excitement. How do you manage that when you're doing that for many, many days, 141 days in a row?
It's a great question. Great question. Fear's an interesting thing, isn't it? Fear's an interesting thing. What are you actually afraid of? And often it's the fear of fear that is the crippling element. I'll give you an example. So I'm paddling in Scotland, and in Scotland, because of the height of the mountains that are right on the cliffs, right on the coast, the islands that are just off the coastal, it creates its own weather, and so that means that weather systems can change within 15 minutes. And I knew it was this particular storm, and I was watching it. I was about 5K off the coast paddling, and I was watching this storm on the land, and it literally hit a mountain, and rather than just going over the top of it, just turned and just came straight at me. And I'm thinking, well, I can't paddle into it. So and often those type of storms that are created within that coastal environment don't like to go out to sea that far. They stay relatively close. So I'm paddling out to sea. So I'm 15K off the coast. I can just about see land in the distance when this storm hits me. And you can't stay on the board in that instance. So I literally am jumping off the back of the board. I've got everything tethered down on the board, and I'm just holding on to the back of the board. I'm tethered to the board with a leash, but I'm holding on. And every now and then the wind is strong enough to take the board, to fling it up in the air, come crashing down. And you just hope that your leash holds on to it at that one, but you're just holding on. I held on for about 7 hours before that storm disappeared. And then, of course, you're not quite sure where you are, but you have to head back. You have to get to land somehow. And that can take, I mean, it took about 3.5, 4 hours after all that to then get somewhere back to life. Was I scared at any time? Of course I was scared. Of course the heart was racing. Of course, all those things. But was I fearful? No, because the Lord blessed me to be in that position. The Lord blessed me to know what to do and how to do it. And yes, you have to dig in. It's not particularly pleasant. As you say, salt water, after about an hour of salt water, it starts to get into bits that you don't want it to get into. But I knew I was going to come out of it. I just knew that, you know what, this is today's test. This is what it's all about. And, and I call those sort of moments my orca moments, because in life, stuff is chucked at you every day. We all get stuff chucked at us every day. But if you've had an orca moment, if you've had that type of weather moment, you just learn, you can just smile and wave at everything. And we've all had those sort of orca moments. We've all had those moments where you've been pushed to your limit. Some are down here in relative comparison, and there's some are way up there. But it doesn't mean that anyone's more important, because in your mind, that's your orca moment. And we sometimes lose track to be able to go back to that and go, do you know what? I've got through that, so I can definitely get through this. And with the blessing of the Lord behind you to give you that smile on your face, because it's all about smiling on your face. If you can smile outwardly, you have to smile inwardly. It's just the effect that the smile gives. And when you smile at other people in the worst situations, they may not think the same as you, but they seem to just smile back. It is what it is. And that's human nature. Again, just blessed by God's presence.
I remember years, and I've shared this a few times, years and years ago. We've got 3 children. This is my two first children, quite small. And our neighbor said, every time we see you're smiling, how are you always so joyful and happy? And my wife, after that conversation, said, who were they talking to? Because literally, do you have any clue what we're going through? We went through absolute hell. At the time we'd lost one of our children, we couldn't sell our house. It was one of the most miserable times. And they said, every time we see you, you are smiling. We did not think that we were, but that was the reality. And a few folks said that. And I thought, well, how is that possible? After all we've just been through, how are we smiling? And I think it is that thing of knowing who Jesus is, knowing that if you can get through this, you can help somebody else. We had people who had been through that something else, who then come and walk alongside us, and they lifted us up. But it's interesting how we can see somebody and think, well, they're sad, they're smiling, they're happy, they're joyful, they're depressed. We don't necessarily understand why, but if we do know Jesus Christ, even through those dark times, we can still smile, and encouraging to Joe and I that people saw us as smiling when we didn't feel that.
Amazing. And that's the strength that he gives. Amazing. That anyone can do that. But that is the Lord. That's for me the crux of what it's all about. When you have a savior in your life that you just rely on, carry. I mean, the amount of times I've been carried. Blessed.
You paddleboarded around. Sorry, stand-up paddleboarded around the UK, 141 days. You've had some amazing encounters of nature, clearly. I guess your heart has probably beaten more than most from that. I guess also you are not risk averse, but actually possibly not as people might think, because you're taking measured risks. You're not just jumping into the sea and going for it because that would be stupid. You are clearly prepared. You're tethered to something that's floating. That's a very sensible thing. So I think risk averse might be one that people would think, well, he's willing to take risks. Yes, but actually they're measured risks, aren't they?
They are absolutely. And yes, of course, there are risks when you paddleboard certain places around the UK, which, let's face it, aren't really meant to be paddleboarded. Of course, you are taking a risk, but it's calculated risk. What's the worst that can happen? I've paddled in 10-meter swell. I've paddled with 80-mile-an-hour winds. I've had anything you could possibly imagine try and climb onto my board, from snakes alligators, sharks, around the world doing this because they're just doing their thing. And sometimes you've entered into their world and they just want to come and see what you're up to. They don't want to cause you any harm, except for bull sharks. I think they would quite happily pull you off and eat you, but you just keep paddling for those. Um, all those different things happen. But it's all part of it. It's all really, this is the part of it.
Yeah, I can. There's definitely parts of you that I can identify with my own life, because as a family, we're willing to take measured risks. When we
Yeah.
sold our house back in 2004, we lost a lot of friends and family. You're stupid, irresponsible. You'll never get on the housing ladder again. We didn't, but God's always provided a home. And if we hadn't sold the house, we wouldn't have got the shop in Shrewsbury. If we hadn't had that, we wouldn't have been able to stand against a lap dancing club when nobody else could be bothered. All those links. And people say, oh, well, you're taking risks. Well, no, actually, because we're trusting in God to provide. Today, we still trust in God to provide. So the risk element, which I can identify with you very much in our own life, is because we're willing to take a risk, but it's a measured risk called by God to do it. And I remember one time we were going for a job and somebody says, oh, you're really irresponsible. Why do you think that the housing situation should be solved for you? You need to provide for yourself. And we said, look, God's already said he's going to provide for that. That's not our problem. Ever since we sold our house in 2004. And actually, we live by faith, and we still do today. Absolutely. And they said, well, that's really risky. And the pastor said, it's the least risky thing you can do to put everything you are in the hands of God. We should have cut across the meeting. We got on with the interview. We didn't go for the job. We actually didn't choose it. But it's interesting how we perceive risk. But as Christians, if you put all of your eggs in that one basket and that basket is held by God, you're taking zero risk.
Yeah, he did. He opens the doors for us. He, within prayer, you ask for that blessing of guidance of where we're going to go. And it would be so easy for certain challenges. COVID was a terrible, terrible thing. Of course it was. But unless COVID had happened, I would not have had this window of 3-4 months to paddle around the UK. Just that would never have happened. You just couldn't have done it. But it was there, it was open, and the doors open to the point that now 5 years on from that, 4 or 5 years on from that, I'm in a world that you couldn't have dreamt leaving teaching and be in now. But again, you look back on it and you go, if that wasn't blessed by the Lord, then crikey, it would have been easy to win the lottery than to have followed and been on that path.
I want to come into the work you're doing now, but I've met along the last couple of years various people who said, COVID was terrible, dreadful, just like you said. However, as a result of COVID happening in the world, everything shut down. I lost my job. I started a charity. I couldn't do my normal work, so I then created this thing instead. And you either see obstacles as things that you cannot get around, or as opportunities for growth and learning something new, which is clearly what you've been through. We've been through the same thing. And I've been privileged to chat to people who've also been through that, who don't look to COVID with any joy, but they do look to the opportunities that COVID created as an amazing sense of God involved in their life, changing them on a different direction to do some really amazing things.
Oh, absolutely. Do you know what? I don't know the stats, but it feels like 99.999% of human beings have a desire, have a wish, but will never follow it because you've got to have that absolute leap of faith. And most of us will not leap for the carrot. We'll only leap if we're being pushed or being shoved, or there's someone with a stick at you. And of course, we make our lives so that doesn't happen. And if nothing else, it taught me that when God presents certain situations, to take that leap, because the fall of which sometimes you take was blessed, because you never would have known that you were going to land on that. Whatever it might be that you never saw, that has now just changed your life for the better for others. Sometimes you don't even see it for yourself because you think, but they have benefited from it. But he never leaves us with anything wanting. And that is, I've come unstuck, but always then being blessed by that situation. It's so many times over the last 5 years. And COVID is a classic example of that.
So you've paddleboarded around the UK. You've been a teacher. You've lived in South Wales, where I would have thought I mean, I know in the UK we are surrounded by water, okay, but there are various parts of the UK where you would not know that you were near the sea. I'm very blessed. We're 15 minutes from the coast, and I love it up in the northeast. But I think most people forget that we are an island nation because they get in their car,
Yes.
they go drive to work, and they never see water apart from a dodgy canal. You know, there's a lot more out there than just dodgy canals. There's the sea. um, but let's get on to above water, which really, from me looking at your life, I can see how God's navigated through all the things you've done, and they kind of join up the dots. At the time, you're thinking, "What on earth is God doing? What serious? What we God? Hello, what are you doing?" And then you can look back and see, "Wow, he's really joined these things." So, above water, I said to you, I didn't know that the first kilometer was quite so exciting. I just thought you were going to say because it's where all the jet skis are and people being annoying in the water, but it's more than that. How I mean, we've done paddleboarding to get some recognition, which gets you this. But where did above water come from? How did you physically start that?
Well, I started at the Surf Lifesaving Club, and the Surf Lifesaving Club, if you're from the Southwest, you understand what surf lifesaving is. It's about getting kids in the water through to adults, enjoying the water, using different types of discipline from surf rescue boards to skis to swimming in the water. And you learn those skills to ideally become a lifeguard or compete within that world. So we were doing that, and we were training all the children. So 4,500 kids a year were coming into our little beach and getting those resources. But that was just local. And I wanted to get a bigger impact. And I knew that as an educationist, there are actually some simple things that we could really teach in schools that you didn't have to be in the water for. You could teach them in the classroom. That just means that when a child goes to the water next time, and that can be the canal, the stinky canal, the river or the pond, your hot tub, people drown in hot tubs every year. So it's all types of water right out to the big blue wobbly thing, which is the sea, and everything in between, and just helping them to understand those absolute basics. So we put this charity together, which then started disseminating information, which meant schools would often go, "Ooh, this is a bit technical. Can you just come in and teach it?" And we were getting such demand for that actually what we do now is we pick on a hub. That might be a school or a community center or a main business center of some description. Invite 50 schools in. They bring 5 or 6 young leaders. We train the young leaders. The young leaders then go back to their schools and share all that information, of which, as I say, 80% of it, you don't even need to be in water to kind of learn and be taught. And it just makes you think. Most people don't think when they get near to water because the joy of seeing the sea. I mean, you've all seen the image. Dad suddenly sees a sea, chucks his top off and runs straight in. It's the worst example you could possibly, without taking the joy away. Hey, let's just stop. Let's just look. Let's just listen. A bit like the old Green Cross Code, but it's the Blue Cross Code that we call it. Stop, look, listen. And if it all goes horribly wrong and we're out in the water, we just float on our back. Just the basics, because it's not the situation, it's not other people, it's not the environment that actually causes the drowning. It's the own person themselves panicking, because panicking kills. So it's teaching them that, and it's been and is incredibly successful. We're on about an 8th year of it, and we go up and down the country doing exactly this, but also just give information and share resources and just trying to educate on that real basic level that all these kids should have, because as you say, we live on an island nation.
I remember years ago, we were up in the Lake District. It was a fairly small lake as they go. And I thought, I'll swim across it. It's not that far. And it actually wasn't. I used to do quite a lot of swimming at that time. However, swimming in a swimming pool in a town centre with heated water is not the same as a lake. It got to a point where I could sort of see the bottom, feel the bottom. You could push yourself down a bit and jump up again. And then it got to a point when it dropped off. And a few things happened at once. One, I started to panic because I thought, I'm quite far from anything and I can't see the bottom anymore. Then I got cold because I realized this water is really cold. This is not a swimming pool. Then I got cramp in one of my legs and then the panic started to set in. Now, Thankfully, I was being, 13, 14. I obviously had the sense to think, this is quite bad. No, I couldn't see anybody. I was too far away. So I tried to get on my back and get my leg working, forced myself not to panic as best I could, because of course, when you got cramp, your leg muscles and then your legs are moving against your will. And all this is going, and I'm thinking, I'm going to die in the Lake District. This is quite distressing. And I didn't want to. It was that simple. Now, I've got no real waves at that point. It's fresh water, so I wasn't choking on salt water. However, I tried to get myself out of a panic, get on my back, because I know I can swing quite a long way that way. So I've sort of accidentally done the thing you just talked about, but I wasn't trained to do that. It was more, I need to survive. And in this position, I'm not going to live very long. Get on my back, because at least I'm basically floating in the water.
You've just summed up. Remember I said about that right decision, wrong decision, turning left, turning right. That's so easily, that situation you just described could have so easily gone another way, and you would have been one of the many statistics. Your ability to be able to swim, perhaps the more confidence than you realized that you had, to just go, whoa, calm it down here, get on your back, get your breathing sorted. And we all can float. Whatever we do is what stops us from doing the floating thing. Just get on your back. And it may take a couple of minutes just to regain your thoughts, but never underestimate the difference between being in open water and the warm, lovely blue swimming pool that's in your local village or town. It's completely different. And that's why it's all about encouraging, and this is why we say promoting, getting people out there, because it's a wonderful environment. But you need to have all the precautions. It's you're not taking risks because they're calculated risks. You've got communication, you've got buoyancy, you've got all these things to just help you be in that situation.
I remember I was in the Scouts. We used to go for a winter weekend up on the mountains in the Lake District. And I remember we were really kitted out. We had a guy that went to the North Pole. He was really good at preparing us. So we had rucksacks with the emergency rations, and we had an emergency blanket and all sorts of things that we might need. And I remember 15, 16, coming off a mountain, dressed appropriately with safety gear, seeing a mum and dad, flip-flops on the mum, shorts on the dad. And I'm thinking, right now, you're 100 yards from the car park and you're probably fine. But even then, it can change quite high because we're already higher. So you're not just a little bit away from the car park. And we'd come out of some fog that just, the cloud drops down. You get very cold. You can't see. Now, we've been taught, just wait, don't keep walking. You need to stand still a little bit, wait until you get your bearings. And we had compasses and maps, and we had leaders and all the rest of it. And we knew that if anything went wrong, we stay still, people will know where we are because we planned our route. We knew where we were supposed to be. So there was loads of planning. But there was this young family. I'm thinking, what are you doing? You're being so stupid and reckless. If you get another half mile up this path, you're going to get a great view. What if the cloud comes? Your kids have got nothing. They hadn't got coats or bags, or they're going to be stranded. Now, that's on the dry land. That's bad enough. Chuck in the water, and all of a sudden, it's 100 times worse more quickly.
Yeah, it's no different on the water. No different on the water. And normally females, I'm being very general here, normally females are really good at weighing up the risks and going. And then if, for example, I see many people out on the water, and there are people that I know, I will be rescuing you either now or in about half an hour's time. But if they're females, you can say, look, if you go that way, the flow of the water, you're going to really struggle. You say that to a bloke on the water, and you can imagine you can say it in the nicest way possible.
Yeah.
You can say, look, if you keep going that way, this is going to happen. But they keep going that way. And then you just say, do you know what? In half an hour's time, when I'm coming back from my training, I'm just going to tow you in. So either listen now or I'll be doing that in half an hour's time. And always, and you can see the stubbornness where they are getting pulled somewhere, getting blown to France, offshore winds, and I'm like, can I just attach and I'll just help you come in now? I'm not trying to be patronizing. I'm not trying to say I'm better than you. This is my world, and you've come into it not dressed appropriately, the equivalent of wearing flip-flops out on the sea. And you're going to get into trouble. And that happens all the time. So I record all that now. And this summer, 56 humans I pulled back. They were either heading to Lyme Bay, Portland, or they were going to France for whatever reason and whatever lack of equipment they had. But I had to tow them in.
I remember watching the documentary. It was on the RNLI, and the RNLI turned up to this boat and they said, what are you doing? We're going from point A to point B. Right. Do you know how fast your boat can go? 2.5 knots. Yeah. Do you know what the current is? 5 knots. Right. So you're going backwards. You are always going to be going backwards. So they had to rescue the boat and pull them in. But they just thought, well, we'll get there eventually. Okay, you're going back 50% quicker than you're going forwards, and you can't do that because your boat won't go no faster. And you think, oh, come on, you use a brain.
Yeah, no, I think the joy and the wow of being out there just sometimes aggles their brain. It really does. And other times it might be because they've just had 8 ciders and think they can paddle to France.
Well, well, yes. There is that sense of male bravado, I guess. It's still very much alive and kicking today of, yeah, I'll make it. They couldn't, but I will. No, no. And actually, I remember as a guy doing, he taught people to drive rally cars, sort of not professionally. They said there's 2 types of driver: the ones that can definitely do it and the ones that can't. So overconfident, underconfident. And he was saying, as a rule, generally, women are more likely to say, how do I do this? Where men will say, I can do that. Now, that can be good and bad, but like this guy said, generally, but, you've got to understand what you can and can't do, and knowing your limits are the difference between coming home and not.
Absolutely is. And with water, that's exactly that, in that the difference can be 1 second from being in a position where I'm struggling to you've passed the point of no return here.
I'm going to have to stop wrapping this up, although I could go on for hours with the conversation for you. If you wanted to sort of encourage people to get into the water, what would you say to them when they're thinking, well, there's sharks out there and there's whales out there and there's puffins going to kill me? How would you encourage people to make the most and be able to enjoy something that in the UK, basically, most of us can easily access?
Yeah, absolutely. So not just the coastal water, but also inland waterways. We've got a phenomenal breadth of environments of which you can get on the water and enjoy, from the most basic of chucking on your swimming costume and going for a swim to stand-up paddleboarding, but organized events, organized instruction. And if you're trying anything new, stop, look, listen, float. Within that stop, look, listen element, the listening bit might be instruction. So on stand-up paddleboarding, if you've only ever paddled on your local canal, suddenly going out into the sea is a very different world. So get instruction. So that's the listening part of it. Half an hour lesson could then open up the doorways for you to have adventures galore, that otherwise you're constantly going, oh, is that right? I don't know about tides. I don't know about the weather. I don't know about you're constantly trying to find out where it can go wrong. So get that instruction. So the stop, look, listen element is so important in any activity to then properly enjoy it, and also get the right equipment. So stand-up paddleboarding is a classic example of, well, that's just a stand-up paddleboard. That's all I need. It's like a car, a stand-up paddleboard. Every single one is different. So some are made for bigger blokes. Some are made for smaller ladies. Some are made for doing this action. Some are made for doing that action. You get the wrong one and it can cause you the problem. So getting instruction just overcomes that, because they'll help you, guide you, get the right bit of kit for your activity. And no matter what the conditions are going, if you know what you're doing, there's the right bit of kit to help you do that and understand how to get out safely. So really simple is that stop, look, listen, and if it all goes horribly wrong, just float. And because you've got good comms, because you would never go out to sea unless you've got good comms, you can just call for help if it's gone to that point to get yourself out of the situation. But hopefully you would never need that, because you've planned if B happens, if C happens, if D happens, to get yourself out. And that's being just sensible on the water.
Brendon, thank you. If people wanted to find out more about Above Water, where do they come to so they can connect with you?
So the website, abovewater.org, and my website is brendonprince.com. So nice and simple. And the Above Water socials is all Above Water UK. So at Above Water UK, and you'll find us on Facebook and Instagram. And then me personally, Brendon Prince, SUP, you can find me on Insta, TikTok, Facebook, all the usual channels. So yeah, especially if you're thinking, do you know what, we'd love to have one of these hub sessions in our local area, get a hold of me and we can see what we can organize.
Brendon, thank you. I love that despite the negatives and the dark side of people are losing their lives. You're not going, right, stay out of the water because it's really dangerous. What you're saying is come in the water and enjoy it because it's brilliant, but have a think before you do. And I love that because it's very easy for us to just react. No, not doing it. It's really bad. Actually, you're saying it's amazing. Just have a think first. But that stop, it's so easy to do, isn't it? It's really hard to stop and say, is it safe? I know personally, I wouldn't go running into the sea for a few reasons. One of which is it safe? Are the flags? Is there a riptide? I wouldn't know if there was one or not. I just know that there could be. And that enough for me to think, do you know, I'm never just going to run into the water. I'd like to know, because I wouldn't have a clue how to recognize it, other than the fact there probably is one somewhere. Might be one here. Let's not be an idiot. Let's just stop and look. But stop, look, listen. It's really simple.
Really simple. Blue Cross code. And if you told that, but anyone listening to this, if you told that to 10 people, you will never know if they actually did it. And that could have saved their lives. You will never know, but it might. So it's worth a punt, isn't it? Just spreading that word. Stop, look, listen, float. Blue Cross code. Get it into people's psyche, around the UK.
I'm writing that down. Stop, look, listen, float. Do you know, if more of life was that, stop, look, listen, pause.
It's a great lesson for life. That just alone.
Isn't it just? Right, Brendon, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
That's a joy. Thank you. God bless.